The sun was a searing eye in the endless sky, casting long, stark shadows across the Arizona desert. The air, thick with the scent of sagebrush and dust, shimmered with heat. Jesse Thorne rode with the ease of a man who had long ago made peace with the vast emptiness around him. His ranch, a cluster of weathered wood and sun-bleached fences, was an hour's ride away, a solitary outpost in a world that seemed to have forgotten him. Jesse was a man of the land. His face, a roadmap of sun and wind, was as rugged as the canyons he worked in. He wasn't a talker. His thoughts were as silent as the desert nights. His days were a rhythm of chores, mending fences, tending to his small herd of cattle, and ensuring his world, as small as it was, remained stable. He had come to this place years ago, seeking a quiet corner to escape a past he chose not to remember. He found it in this harsh, beautiful land, where the only company he needed was the quiet thrum of his own life. He was checking a section of fence along a narrow canyon wall when the sound tore through the silence. It wasn't the call of a hawk or the rustle of a snake. It was a cry, sharp and human, followed by a guttural roar. Jesse's hand went to the worn hilt of his revolver. His horse, a sturdy bay named Dusty, whinnied nervously. The roar came again, closer this time, and Jesse recognized it. A mountain lion. His heart hammered against his ribs. He had no reason to intervene. The canyon wasn't his territory, and the cry could have come from anyone. A prospector, a stray traveler. He had learned long ago that in this unforgiving land, sometimes the best thing to do was to mind your own business. But the second cry was different. It was the sound of a struggle, and it carried a note of age, not youth. He spurred Dusty forward, his caution warring with an instinct he couldn't ignore. He rounded a bend in the canyon and saw the scene unfold below him. A man, an elder, was on the ground, his back against a rock face. He wore traditional Lakota clothing, and his hair, long and braided, was streaked with gray. He held a staff, but the mountain lion, a magnificent, terrifying beast, was circling him, its tail lashing in fury. The elder Wombly, his face etched with ancient wisdom and pain, was clearly weakened, his movements slow. Jesse's mind worked in a flash. He dismounted, pulling his rifle from its saddle scabbard. He knew he couldn't risk a shot while the elder was so close to the lion. He needed to create a distraction. He fired a single round into the air. The crack of the rifle's shot echoed off the canyon walls, a deafening sound that startled the predator. The mountain lion paused, its gaze shifting from the old man to Jesse. For a moment, time seemed to stand still, the hunter assessing this new threat. It was all the time Jesse needed. He fired again, this time aiming for the ground right in front of the lion. The dirt kicked up and the bullet whined as it ricocheted off the rock. The lion, unnerved by the noise and the suddenness of the attack, snarled and bounded away, disappearing into the high canyon rocks as quickly as it had appeared. Jesse holstered his rifle and descended the small slope carefully. He approached the elder, his senses on high alert. The man was breathing heavily, a deep gash on his arm bleeding freely. His face was a mask of pain, but his eyes, dark and piercing, held a surprising strength. He looked at Jesse with a mixture of suspicion and profound gratitude. Jesse knelt beside him. "Can you walk?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. The elder shook his head, wincing. "It is a long way," he said in heavily accented English, his voice thin. Jesse assessed the situation. He couldn't leave him here. The wound was deep, and the sun was relentless. The nearest town was too far, and Jesse's conscience wouldn't allow him to abandon a man, no matter who he was. He knew that taking a Lakota elder to his ranch was a complicated proposition. The tensions between settlers and the Lakota were a living, breathing thing in this territory. But Jesse's moral compass, a silent, unshakable guide, pointed him in one direction. "Help the man." "I've got a ranch nearby," Jesse said, his tone matter of fact. "I can patch you up there. We'll get you back on your feet." The elder looked at him for a long moment, a gaze that seemed to see not just the man on the surface, but the soul within. "My name is Wombly," he said, his voice stronger now, "and I owe you my life." Jesse nodded, avoiding the gaze. He didn't want thanks or debts. He just wanted to do what was right. He helped Wombly to his feet, a difficult task given the elder's pain and his own reluctance to touch a stranger. He supported Wombly as they made the slow, arduous climb back up to where Dusty waited. The journey back to the ranch would be a long one, and as the sun began its slow descent, Jesse knew that his quiet, solitary life had just been changed forever. The journey back to the ranch was a slow and painful one. Jesse draped Wombly over the back of Dusty, the old man groaning with every jolt of the horse's gait. The afternoon sun, once a fierce presence, now softened into a warm, forgiving gold, bathing the landscape in a soft glow. Jesse led Dusty on foot, his mind a whirlwind of practical concerns and unspoken anxieties. He was a man of routines. His life was a series of predictable actions, and this was a wild, unpredictable deviation. He had never had a guest at his ranch, let alone one from a different world. He knew the stories, the distrust, the history of violence. He wasn't a part of it, but he knew he existed on the fringes of it, a lone white man in a land claimed by both sides. He wondered what Wombly thought of him, a simple rancher who had intervened in a world that was not his. When they finally arrived at the ranch, the sight was a welcome one. The small two-room cabin stood as a testament to Jesse's resilience. The corral was empty, save for a few horses, and the air was still, a profound quiet broken only by the creak of the gate and the tired whinny of Dusty. Jesse helped Wombly down, his movements careful and deliberate. He led the old man to the cabin's single bedroom, which was little more than a cot and a small chest of drawers. Wombly sank onto the cot with a sigh of relief, his face pale with exhaustion. "Water," Wombly rasped, his eyes closed. Jesse nodded. He fetched a bucket of water from the well and brought it inside along with a clean rag. He knelt beside Wombly and gently began to clean the deep gash on his arm. The wound was jagged and raw, a testament to the mountain lion's claws. Wombly winced, but remained silent, his stoicism a quiet testament to his strength. As Jesse worked, he noticed the intricate beadwork on Wombly's clothes and the simple yet profound beauty of his moccasins. He felt a fleeting sense of awe and a sharp pang of ignorance. He knew nothing of this man's life, his beliefs, his world. They were two planets that had collided in the desert, and now they were orbiting each other in the confined space of a small cabin. Once the wound was cleaned, Jesse fetched a clean piece of cloth and a needle and thread. He had learned basic stitching from a doctor he had met years ago in a mining town. It was a skill he had hoped he would never have to use, but he was grateful for it now. His hands, though rough and calloused from a life of hard labor, were surprisingly steady as he began to stitch the wound closed. Wombly watched him, his gaze unwavering. "You are a man of many skills," he observed, his voice a low, steady murmur. "Just what's needed to survive out here," Jesse replied, his eyes focused on his work. When he was finished, he wrapped the wound in a clean bandage. He then brought Wombly a bowl of warm stew and a cup of black coffee. Wombly ate and drank slowly, his strength seeming to return with every spoonful. As night fell, the desert came alive with a different kind of quiet. The stars, countless and impossibly bright, dotted the inky blackness of the sky. The only sound was the crackle of the fire Jesse had lit in the hearth and the soft, steady breathing of Wombly. Jesse sat in a chair, his own dinner forgotten, his mind replaying the day's events. He had done a good thing. He had saved a life. But the act, a single moment of courage, had created a chain reaction. He had brought a piece of the world he had sought to escape right to his doorstep. He wondered what the Lakota would do when they found out. He wondered if they would see him as a savior or an intruder. He didn't know the answer, and the uncertainty was a new and unsettling feeling. He glanced at Wombly, sleeping peacefully on the cot. The old man looked frail, but Jesse knew better. He had seen the fire in his eyes. He had seen the strength. He had a feeling this man was more than he seemed, and their brief encounter in the canyon was just the beginning of a much larger story. Jesse, the solitary rancher, had just opened his home to a world he had tried so hard to stay away from. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, he felt something other than the steady rhythm of his own isolation. He felt a sense of purpose. Word travels fast in the desert, carried on the wind and whispered between trading posts. The news of the white rancher saving a Lakota elder from a mountain lion was a tale that, at first, was met with disbelief. The Lakota people, who had suffered countless injustices at the hands of settlers, were wary. A white man, a cowboy, saving one of their own. It didn't fit the narrative they had come to know. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, the days fell into an unexpected, quiet rhythm. Wombly, recovering with remarkable speed, began to move around the small cabin. His presence, initially a source of awkward silence, started to fill the space with a new kind of energy. He was a man of stories, and though he spoke little, his eyes held a history that was as deep and wide as the land around them. Jesse found himself listening more than he ever had before. He'd be mending a fence, and Wombly would be sitting on the porch, a silent, watchful presence. At night, by the fire, Wombly would tell Jesse stories of the Lakota people, of the buffalo hunts, of the sacredness of the land, of the spiritual connection between all living things. He spoke of the Great Spirit, Wakantanka, and the wisdom of his ancestors. Jesse, a man who saw the land as something to be worked and tamed, found himself seeing it in a new light, as a living, breathing entity. The bond between the two men deepened with each shared meal, each quiet conversation. Wombly saw in Jesse not just a man of courage, but a man of honor and solitude, a man who, like the desert itself, was rough on the outside, but held a quiet strength within. Jesse, in turn, saw Wombly not as a native elder from stories and legends, but as a man of profound wisdom and quiet dignity, a grandfather figure. One afternoon, as Jesse was finishing his chores, he saw a rider in the distance. He grabbed his rifle, a sense of unease settling in his gut. He knew this moment was coming. The rider was a young Lakota warrior. He approached the ranch, his posture tense, his gaze sharp and wary. He stopped a respectful distance from the cabin, his hand on the hilt of his knife. Jesse stepped out of the cabin, rifle in hand, but held it low, a sign that he was not looking for a fight. "Afternoon," Jesse said, his voice calm. The young warrior, whose name was Kola, did not reply. His eyes scanned the cabin, the corral, the land. He was looking for Wombly. Jesse knew what he was there for. He turned and gestured toward the cabin. "He's inside. He's doing fine." Wombly appeared in the doorway, his arm still bandaged but a look of peace on his face. "Kola," he said, his voice carrying the weight of a tribal leader. Kola's tense posture relaxed. He dismounted and approached his elder, his relief visible on his face. He spoke to Wombly in their native tongue, a rapid-fire exchange that Jesse could not understand. He watched them, a silent observer in a world he was only just beginning to comprehend. Wombly gestured to Jesse, and Kola turned to look at the rancher, a new light in his eyes. "He says, 'You are a good man,'" Kola said in halting English, his voice a low murmur. "The stories, they are true. You saved him." Jesse just nodded. He didn't want the praise, he just wanted to get back to his life. But he knew in his gut that his life was no longer his own. Kola looked at Wombly with a deep sense of reverence, and then back at Jesse with a newfound respect. Kola explained that the tribe had sent him to find out the truth. The story of a white man's kindness was so unbelievable that they feared Wombly had been taken prisoner. He told Wombly that he would ride back and tell his people what he had seen. As Kola rode away, Jesse felt a familiar pang of anxiety. The storm was gathering, the news would spread, and soon his isolated ranch would become a point of interest for more than just the Lakota. He had an uneasy feeling that his act of kindness had set something much larger in motion, something that he had no control over. The quiet, solitary life he had built was about to be put to the test. News of Jesse Thorne's heroic act and Wombly's recovery spread rapidly through the Lakota camps and the nearby settler towns. In the Lakota villages, the story ignited a heated debate. For many, Wombly's survival was a miracle, a sign from the Great Spirit, and Jesse was seen as an honorable man, a rare exception to the injustices they had endured. But for others, the story was a bitter pill to swallow. They saw it as a sign of weakness, an act of a Lakota elder accepting help from the very people who had taken their land and their way of life. The descent was led by Black Claw, a young, fiercely proud warrior who had lost his family in a conflict with settlers years ago. He was a man consumed by anger and a thirst for justice. He saw Wombly's act as a betrayal. He argued that Wombly, by accepting help from a white man and staying on his land, was condoning the presence of the settlers. Black Claw's words, filled with bitterness and righteous fury, resonated with a growing number of young warriors who felt their traditions and their land were under constant threat. Back at the ranch, Jesse was oblivious to the political storm brewing around him. He was focused on the day-to-day. He found that Wombly, despite his age, was a man of incredible insight. Wombly had a deep knowledge of the land, a wisdom that Jesse, for all his years on the ranch, had never grasped. Wombly taught him how to read the clouds to predict rain, how to find water where there seemed to be none, and how to understand the language of the wind. The relationship between the two men was no longer that of a rescuer and the rescued. It had become a partnership, a symbiotic exchange of knowledge and culture. Jesse, the practical rancher, and Wombly, the spiritual elder, were two halves of a whole, a bridge between two worlds. One morning, while Wombly was sitting on the porch, he saw something in the distance that made his gaze sharpen. He looked at Jesse, a new seriousness in his eyes. "They are coming," Wombly said, his voice a low whisper. "Who?" Jesse asked, his hand instinctively moving to his rifle. "My people," Wombly said. "A delegation. They are coming to see me, to see you." Jesse felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He knew this day was coming, but the reality of it was still a shock. He had a feeling it wasn't just a friendly visit. Later that afternoon, a group of 5 Lakota riders appeared on the horizon. They rode with a dignity and grace that was both intimidating and awe-inspiring. Jesse stood on his porch, his hand on his rifle, his posture tense. He could feel Wombly's silent presence behind him. The group was led by Grey Wolf, a respected tribal chief, a man of quiet authority. He dismounted first, his gaze moving from Jesse to Wombly. The others followed suit, their faces a mixture of curiosity, respect, and suspicion. Grey Wolf spoke to Wombly in their language, a long, earnest conversation that Jesse could not understand. Wombly gestured to Jesse, and Grey Wolf turned to look at the rancher, his gaze a deep, searching one. "My brother," Grey Wolf said, his voice low and solemn, "you have done a great honor to our people. We have heard the stories, but there are those who do not believe them. They say you hold Wombly against his will. They say you are using him." Jesse felt a flash of anger. "That's not true," he said, his voice tight. "He is here of his own free will. He is my guest." Wombly stepped forward. "I am here because this man saved me," he said in English, his voice firm. "He is my friend. He is a man of honor. He is not our enemy." Grey Wolf looked at the faces of his men. He could see the doubt in their eyes, the seeds of discontent that Black Claw had sown. He knew that Wombly's words alone would not be enough. He needed to see more. "We will stay a few days," Grey Wolf announced. "We will see for ourselves the truth of this matter. We will see if the white man is truly our friend." Jesse felt a wave of resignation. His private, isolated life was now a public spectacle. He had no choice but to let them stay. He knew he was being tested, and he knew that the outcome of this test would not only affect him and Wombly, but the fragile peace between two very different worlds. He had saved a life, but he was beginning to realize that the hardest part was just beginning. The weight of an entire tribe's trust and the suspicion of others rested squarely on his shoulders. The arrival of the Lakota delegation changed the very air around Jesse's ranch. The quiet solitude he had cultivated for years was replaced by a constant humming tension. The 5 warriors, led by the imposing Grey Wolf, made their camp 100 yards from Jesse's cabin. They were a silent, watchful presence, their eyes following Jesse's every move. Jesse tried to go about his daily routine, but the weight of their scrutiny was a heavy burden. He mended fences with a rifle slung over his shoulder. He fed his cattle with one eye on their camp. The suspicion in their eyes, especially the younger warriors, was a palpable thing. He felt like an actor on a stage, every action of his life being judged. Grey Wolf, however, was a man of observation, not of judgment. He spent his days watching Jesse. He saw the care with which Jesse tended to his animals. He saw the way Jesse and Wombly sat by the fire at night, 2 men from different worlds, but clearly bound by something. He saw Jesse treat Wombly with a quiet respect that was more meaningful than any grand gesture. Wombly, for his part, was a bridge between the 2 camps. He would speak to his people in their language, telling them about Jesse's kindness, his quiet strength, his unwavering honor. He would tell them of the simple, honest man who had risked his life for a stranger. But the words of an elder, while respected, were not enough for all. The seeds of discontent sown by Black Claw were taking root. One evening, as the sun was setting, Grey Wolf approached Jesse. He held a peace pipe in his hand. Jesse, a man who had never seen a peace pipe outside of a painting, felt a sense of profound awkwardness. "I wish to smoke with you," Grey Wolf said, his voice a low rumble. "We will speak of what is in our hearts." Jesse nodded, his heart thudding in his chest. He sat on a log opposite the chief. Wombly and the other warriors watched from a respectful distance. Grey Wolf lit the pipe and took a long puff. He offered it to Jesse. Jesse, unsure of the protocol, took it and inhaled, the smoke, fragrant with tobacco and sage, filling his lungs. It was an offering, a gesture of peace and trust. "My people have suffered greatly," Grey Wolf began, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon. "The white man, he takes what he wants. He does not ask. He does not respect. We see this with our own eyes." "I am not a part of that," Jesse said, his voice low. "I just want to live my life." "But your world is connected to ours now," Grey Wolf countered. "Your act of kindness, it is a sign. For some, it is a sign of hope. For others, it is a sign of weakness." Black Claw: "He says this is a trick. He says you want to use Wombly to take more of our land." Jesse felt a wave of frustration. "That's insane. I'm a rancher. I just want to be left alone." "To us, a man's word is his bond," Grey Wolf said, ignoring Jesse's frustration. "To us, a man is judged by his actions. You saved our elder. That is a great action. But the path forward is not easy. You have earned our respect, but the respect of a few is not enough. The respect of the many, that is what you need. That is what you have to earn." "How?" Jesse asked, the question a raw plea. Grey Wolf smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "We will see," he said. "The land will show us. The Great Spirit will show us. The truth, it is not in our words. It is in our hearts and our actions." The conversation ended there. The unspoken truth hung in the air. Jesse was on trial. His character, his intentions, his very being were being scrutinized. He had passed the initial test, the test of the rescue, but now he faced a new, more profound test, the test of trust. He had saved Wombly's body, but now he had to prove he was worthy of Wombly's trust, and by extension, the trust of an entire tribe. He looked at the vast, silent land around him, a land he thought he knew so well, and realized he had never seen its true nature. It was a land of beauty and conflict, and he was now a player in its ancient, ongoing drama. The presence of the Lakota delegation was not an isolated event. Word of their encampment at Jesse Thorne's ranch had traveled to the nearby settler town of Blackwood. Blackwood was a small, dusty town, but it was a hub of commerce and, more often than not, conflict. It was here that a man named Gideon Miller held sway. Miller was a land speculator, a man with a ruthless ambition and a deep-seated hatred for the Lakota people. He saw them not as a people, but as an obstacle to his plans for westward expansion. When Miller heard that a Lakota delegation was camped at a white man's ranch, his suspicious mind went into overdrive. He saw it as a dangerous alliance, a pact that could threaten his land claims and his influence. He feared that Jesse Thorne, a man he had never met, was colluding with the Lakota to establish a claim on the vast, unclaimed territory beyond the ranch, a territory Miller had long coveted. He gathered a group of his men, a collection of rough-looking cowboys and hired guns, men who saw the Lakota as nothing more than savages. He fed them lies, fanning the flames of their prejudice. He told them that Jesse was a traitor, that he was conspiring with the Lakota to start a war. He painted a picture of a brave white rancher being held hostage by a group of treacherous Indians. He knew the story would appeal to their baser instincts, and he was right. Back at the ranch, the days were filled with a tense calm. The Lakota warriors, having seen Wombly's recovery and the quiet respect between the two men, were beginning to soften. They watched Jesse with less suspicion and more curiosity. One evening, Wombly, who had been sitting with his back to the horizon, turned and looked at Jesse. His eyes, usually serene, were now filled with a quiet urgency. "A shadow is coming," Wombly said, his voice low and serious. "What do you mean?" Jesse asked. "Not a shadow of the land," Wombly replied. "A shadow of the heart. A bad man is coming. He brings with him bad feelings." Jesse felt a chill run down his spine. He had learned to trust Wombly's instincts. He knew the old man wasn't speaking of a physical storm. He was speaking of a human one. The next morning, Jesse was up before dawn. He walked the perimeter of his land, his senses on high alert. He noticed something he hadn't seen before, a group of riders in the distance. They were too far away to make out, but their movements were not those of a friendly party. They rode with purpose, a sense of aggression in their very posture. He raced back to the cabin. Grey Wolf and the warriors were already awake, their faces grim. They had seen them too. "They are not of our people," Grey Wolf said, his hand on his rifle. "They are white men. They come with bad intentions." Jesse's heart hammered in his chest. "How many?" "Many," Grey Wolf said. "More than us. They ride with anger in their hearts." The two men, a Lakota chief and a white rancher, stood side by side, their gazes fixed on the approaching riders. Their worlds, once so separate, were now inextricably linked. The storm had arrived. Jesse's act of kindness, a simple, selfless deed, had put him on a collision course with a darkness that had long been festering in the heart of the West. He had saved a life, but now he had to defend it, and in doing so he had to defend the fragile hope of peace that had been born in the canyon. The quiet life he had built was about to be broken, and he was ready. He had no choice. The approaching riders, a group of 15 armed men led by the sneering Gideon Miller, were a dark stain on the sun-drenched landscape. They rode with the arrogance of men who believed they were on the right side of history, their prejudice a shield against any semblance of reason. Their presence was a clear violation of the fragile peace that had been slowly building between Jesse and the Lakota delegation. Jesse and Grey Wolf stood together, their posture reflecting a unified front. The other Lakota warriors had moved to strategic positions, their rifles at the ready, their faces stoic and determined. The air was thick with the unspoken tension of a brewing conflict. Jesse felt a surge of adrenaline, a cold, hard resolve settling in his gut. He had prepared for a life of solitude, not one of battle, but he knew he couldn't back down. This was no longer just about his land. It was about the man he had saved and the trust he had earned. Miller and his men stopped a short distance from the ranch, the dust from their horses creating a hazy cloud. Miller, a tall, imposing man with a cruel smirk, dismounted slowly. He looked at Jesse, his eyes full of contempt, and then at the Lakota warriors, a sneer spreading across his face. "Well, well, well," Miller said, his voice a mocking drawl. "Look what we have here. A white man playing house with the savages. I always knew you were a traitor, Thorne." Jesse ignored the insult. "This is my land, Miller," he said, his voice low and steady. "You have no business here." "I have every business here," Miller countered, his eyes narrowing. "I've heard you're conspiring with these hostiles. You're giving them a place to plot against us. We're here to put a stop to it." "I saved their elder's life," Jesse said, his voice rising with a controlled anger. "He is my guest." "Lies!" one of Miller's men shouted. "They've got him tied up inside, I bet. They're using him." Grey Wolf stepped forward, his expression unreadable. He spoke in his native tongue, his voice a low, powerful rumble. He pointed to Wombly, who was standing beside Jesse. The elder looked at the intruders, his gaze unwavering, filled with a quiet dignity. "What's he saying?" Miller demanded, a hint of unease in his voice. "He says we are at peace," Jesse translated, his eyes never leaving Miller's. "He says Wombly is not a prisoner. He says you should leave this place." Miller laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Peace? There will be no peace as long as these heathens are on our land." He pulled out his revolver, his movements slow and deliberate. "We're taking back what's ours, and we're going to teach you a lesson for siding with them, Thorne." The unspoken tension broke. The Lakota warriors raised their rifles. Jesse, his own rifle now in his hands, looked at Grey Wolf. The chief gave him a silent, knowing nod. There was no need for words. An alliance had been formed, forged in the face of a common enemy. "Get off my land," Jesse said, his voice a cold command. Miller's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of stunned rage. He had not expected this. He had not expected the white man and the Lakota to stand together. He had expected to find a captive, a traitor, not a man who was now, for all intents and purposes, a part of a Lakota family. The unwavering solidarity he saw in the faces of the Lakota warriors and the determined resolve in Jesse Thorne's eyes was a clear message. They were not to be trifled with. Miller knew he was outnumbered and outmatched. He snarled in frustration, his hand tightening on his gun. He wanted a fight, but he knew he couldn't win. He mounted his horse, a promise of revenge in his eyes. "This isn't over, Thorne," Miller spat. "This land is ours, and you have made a powerful enemy." He and his men rode away, leaving a trail of dust and frustration. The air, which had been thick with tension, now carried a different kind of silence, a silence of victory, of an alliance forged. Jesse lowered his rifle, his shoulders slumping with relief. He looked at Grey Wolf, and the two men, a white rancher and a Lakota chief, shared a look of mutual respect, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond that had been formed. They had faced a common enemy, and in doing so they had discovered a shared humanity. The storm had passed, but Jesse knew that Miller's threat was not an empty one. He had earned the trust of a tribe, but in doing so, he had invited a new and dangerous enemy to his doorstep. The journey to peace was far from over. After Miller's humiliating retreat, a profound sense of relief settled over the ranch. The air, which had been thick with hostility, now felt lighter, almost celebratory. Grey Wolf, seeing that the immediate threat was gone, spoke to Jesse, his voice filled with an air of respect he hadn't shown before. "You are a true man," Grey Wolf said, his gaze unwavering. "You did not run from the fight. You stood with us." Jesse just nodded, the adrenaline slowly leaving his system. He didn't see himself as a hero, just a man who had done what was right. But the look in Grey Wolf's eyes told him that his actions meant more than he could comprehend. He wasn't just a rancher anymore. He was an ally. The next few days were a blur of unexpected activity. The Lakota warriors decided to set up a more permanent encampment near the ranch. Their presence transformed the landscape. Teepees, made of buffalo hide, rose against the backdrop of the canyons, their white conical shapes a stark contrast to the red earth. The scent of wood smoke, mixed with the faint aroma of cooked meat and herbs, filled the air. Jesse, a man accustomed to the quiet of his own company, was suddenly surrounded by a bustling community. He watched from a distance, fascinated, as the warriors went about their daily lives. They cared for their horses with a gentle, practiced hand. They told stories around the fire at night, their voices low and melodic, punctuated by bursts of laughter. He saw children, their faces bright with curiosity, peering at him from behind their mothers' skirts. He had always seen the Lakota as a single, homogeneous group, a force to be feared or avoided. Now he saw them as individuals, as fathers, mothers, and children, a community with a rich history and a vibrant culture. His relationship with Grey Wolf and the other warriors deepened. They no longer saw him as just a strange white man. They saw him as Jesse Thorne, the man who had saved Wombley's life, the man who had stood with them against a common enemy. They began to teach him things. A young warrior named Red Feather showed him how to track deer by their footprints alone, a skill Jesse had always struggled with. Grey Wolf showed him a place high in the canyons where a spring of crystal-clear water gushed from the rocks, a place unknown to the settlers, a sacred place. Jesse, in turn, shared his world with them. He showed them how to mend a fence with wire, a concept foreign to them. He explained the purpose of his tools, the mechanics of his rifle, and the intricate process of branding cattle. The two worlds, once separated by a chasm of mistrust and prejudice, were beginning to find a common ground, a bridge built on shared knowledge and mutual respect. One evening, as Jesse and Wombley sat by the fire, Wombley spoke of the deeper meaning of what was happening. "The Great Spirit," Wombley said, his voice a low, reverent whisper, "has brought us together for a reason. You did not just save my life, Jesse. You have shown my people that there are good men among your people. You have given them hope, and you have shown me that a man's heart can be as wide as the plains." Jesse felt a profound sense of humility. He had never considered the impact of his actions. He had just acted on instinct, but in Wombley's words he saw the larger picture. He was no longer a solitary rancher. He was a symbol, a bridge, a living testament to the idea that peace was possible, even in a world consumed by conflict. But even as the Lakota encampment settled in, Jesse knew their presence was a fragile thing. He knew that Miller would not give up. He knew that the seeds of discontent that Blackclaw had sown within the Lakota community were still there, dormant, but not dead. He knew that their small alliance was a defiant act, a challenge to the established order, and that challenges never go unanswered in the unforgiving world of the Old West. The ranch was now a beacon, a symbol of hope for some, and a target for others. The quiet, isolated life he had so carefully built was gone, replaced by a life of purpose and danger. He had a feeling that the greatest test of all was still to come. He was ready for it. The days at the ranch fell into a new, comfortable rhythm. The Lakota warriors went about their daily lives, hunting, training, and caring for their horses. Their children, once shy and wary, now played with a carefree abandon, their laughter echoing across the canyons. The ranch, once a place of profound solitude, was now a vibrant, living community. Jesse found himself spending more and more time with Grey Wolf. The two men, a rancher and a chief, would sit on the porch, watching the sun rise or set, their conversations a mix of shared wisdom and unspoken understanding. Jesse learned of the Lakota's deep connection to the land, their respect for nature, and their profound spiritual beliefs. Grey Wolf, in turn, learned about the solitary life of a rancher, the daily grind, the quiet struggles, the simple joys of a hard-earned life. One afternoon, a Lakota scout rode into the encampment, his face grim. He spoke to Grey Wolf in hushed, urgent tones. Jesse watched as Grey Wolf's face hardened. He knew instinctively that something was wrong. Grey Wolf walked over to Jesse, his expression grave. "A message has come," he said, his voice low, "from Black Claw. He is not happy. He says Wombly is being held against his will. He says he is coming to rescue him." Jesse felt a cold knot form in his stomach. The threat from Miller was one thing, an external force. But a threat from within the Lakota community, a conflict rooted in their own history and pain, was a far more dangerous thing. "What does he want?" Jesse asked. "He wants to challenge you," Grey Wolf said. "He wants to challenge Wombly's judgment. He wants to challenge me. He is angry and his heart is filled with poison. He is coming with many warriors. He says he will take back what is ours." Jesse's mind raced. He had faced down Miller and his men, but this was different. This was an internal conflict, a clash of ideologies. He couldn't just shoot his way out of this one. He had to prove his worth, not just to the warriors who were already here, but to those who were coming with a heart full of suspicion and hatred. "What do we do?" Jesse asked. "We wait," Grey Wolf said, "and we prepare. We will not fight them, not with guns. We will fight them with our hearts. We will show them the truth." Jesse felt a flicker of hope. He knew that Grey Wolf, a man of profound wisdom, was right. A fight would only lead to more bloodshed, more pain, more bitterness. They had to show Black Claw and his men that they were wrong, that the alliance between Jesse and Wombly was not a sign of weakness but a sign of strength. The next few days were a flurry of preparations. The Lakota warriors practiced their war games, their movements a fluid, graceful dance of strength and skill. They sharpened their knives and cleaned their bows. Jesse, for his part, prepared his own weapons, a silent acknowledgement that even a peaceful resolution might require a show of force. Wombly, now fully recovered, sat with Jesse on the porch. He was calm, a profound peace in his eyes. He spoke of the old ways, of the importance of honor and the power of peace. "Black Claw is a good man," Wombly said. "His heart is in the right place, but his mind is clouded by anger. He has lost so much. He cannot see the new path." Jesse felt a pang of empathy for Black Claw. He too had lost so much. He too had been blinded by a past he couldn't forget. He understood the rage, the bitterness, but he also understood that holding on to that anger was a self-destructive path. He had chosen to let go, to embrace a new path, and he hoped in his heart that he could show Black Claw that there was another way. As the sun began to set, Jesse looked out at the Lakota camp, their teepees glowing in the warm golden light. He looked at the vast silent land around him, a land that had once been his sanctuary. It was no longer a place of solitude, but a place of community, of hope, of an alliance that defied all logic. He knew that the confrontation with Black Claw would be the ultimate test of that alliance. He had saved a life, he had faced an external enemy, and now he had to face an internal one, a man whose heart was a reflection of the very darkness he had escaped. The stakes had never been higher. The morning air was crisp and cool, a welcome respite from the relentless heat of the Arizona sun. But for Jesse and the Lakota at the ranch, it was a morning filled with anticipation and a quiet dread. The scouts had returned with news. Black Claw and his warriors were less than a day's ride away. The atmosphere in the encampment was different now. The playful laughter of the children had been replaced by a quiet solemnity. The warriors were calm, but their readiness was palpable. They spoke in low, serious tones, their gazes fixed on the horizon, waiting for the inevitable confrontation. Jesse felt a cold, hard knot in his stomach. He was a rancher, not a diplomat. He was a man of action, not of words. He had faced down Miller and his men, a straightforward conflict of good versus evil. But this was a different kind of fight. This was a fight for the heart of a people, a clash of traditions and beliefs, and he felt hopelessly out of his depth. Grey Wolf, however, was a rock of calm. He walked with a quiet dignity, his face a mask of serene resolve. He spoke to his warriors, not of violence, but of honor, He reminded them that they were not to fight their brothers, but to show them the truth. He told them that Wombly's words and Jesse's actions were a testament to a new path, a path of peace. Jesse stood by Wombly, a silent, watchful presence. Wombly, now a pillar of strength, spoke to Jesse with a gentle calm. "Do not worry, my friend," he said. "The Great Spirit will guide us. We will show them that a new day has dawned." Jesse found a small comfort in Wombly's words, but a part of him remained skeptical. He had seen the hatred in Miller's eyes. He had heard the bitterness in Black Claw's message. He knew that hatred was a powerful force, and that words, no matter how wise, were often no match for a heart consumed by anger. As the sun began its slow descent, a cloud of dust appeared on the horizon. The sight was both breathtaking and terrifying. It was a large group, over 30 warriors, riding with a grim purpose. Their faces were painted with war paint, their bodies a testament to a long history of conflict. They were not a peaceful delegation, they were a war party. They stopped at a respectful distance from the ranch, their horses pawing at the ground impatiently. At the head of the group was Black Claw, a young, muscular warrior with a face a mask of controlled fury. His eyes, dark and intense, were fixed on Jesse. He saw not a man, but a symbol of everything he hated. Black Claw dismounted, his movements a graceful display of coiled energy. He walked toward the ranch, his gaze never leaving Jesse's. He was a living embodiment of the rage and pain of a people who had been wronged for generations. "I have come for my elder," Black Claw said, his voice a low, threatening rumble. "I have come to take him away from the white man who holds him captive." "He is not a captive," Jesse said, his voice steady. "He is my guest." "Lies!" Black Claw spat, his voice rising in anger. "You have bewitched him. You have filled his head with your lies. You have turned him against his own people." Wombly stepped forward, his body frail but his spirit strong. "Black Claw, my son," he said, his voice filled with a paternal love. "You are mistaken. This man, he is not my captor. He is my friend. He saved me. He gave me shelter. He gave me a new path." Black Claw's eyes, full of anger, darted from Wombly to Jesse. He saw an old man, a man he respected, defending a white man, an enemy. The sight was a bitter one. He felt a profound sense of betrayal. He was a warrior, a defender of his people, and he was being told to stand down. "You have been fooled, old man," Black Claw shouted. "He has taken your land. He has taken your honor. I will not stand by and watch." He turned to his warriors, his voice rising to a crescendo. "My brothers, we will not let this white man steal our honor. We will take back what is ours." The warriors, fueled by Black Claw's fiery speech, raised their rifles and bows, their faces grim. Jesse and Grey Wolf, standing side by side, stood their ground, their own weapons at the ready. The two groups, two factions of the same people, were on a collision course. The silence that followed was deafening, a vacuum of human emotion ready to explode. Jesse knew this was it, the moment of truth. He had saved a life, but now he had to save a fragile peace. He had to prove to a man consumed by hatred that there was another way. And in that moment, in that quiet desert, a new kind of war was about to begin. The tension hung in the air like a thick fog, suffocating and heavy. Black Claw's warriors, a sea of grim faces and raised weapons, stood poised for battle. They were a testament to the pain and suffering of a people pushed to their breaking point. Jesse, Grey Wolf, and their small band of Lakota allies stood their ground, their own rifles and bows at the ready, a symbol of a fragile but powerful alliance. "Stand down, Black Claw," Grey Wolf commanded, his voice a deep, authoritative rumble. "This is not a path of honor. This is a path of destruction." "Honor?" Black Claw spat, his eyes blazing with fury. "There is no honor in serving the white man. There is only shame. I will not stand by and watch our traditions be erased." "Our traditions are not erased," Wombly said, his voice a steady, calm whisper that seemed to cut through the anger. "They are being transformed. This man, he is not our enemy. He is our teacher. He has shown me that there are other paths, paths of peace, paths of understanding." Black Claw's anger was a tangible force. He could not comprehend Wombly's words. He had lived his life with a single purpose, to fight the white man. To see his elder, a man he respected above all others, defending a white man was a betrayal he could not bear. Jesse, seeing the anger in Black Claw's eyes, knew that words were not enough. He had to act. He slowly lowered his rifle, his movements deliberate and clear. A gasp went through both groups. His own men looked at him with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. Black Claw's men, for a brief moment, looked at him with something akin to curiosity. "I am not your enemy," Jesse said, his voice low and steady. "I have no desire to fight you. I only ask that you see the truth with your own eyes." Black Claw's eyes narrowed. "You are a coward," he sneered. "You are afraid to fight." "I am not afraid," Jesse replied, a new resolve in his voice. "I am a man of peace. I do not want to shed blood. I ask you to do the same." The standoff continued, a silent battle of wills. The tension was a living thing, a coiled serpent ready to strike. Jesse held his ground, his eyes fixed on Black Claw's, his body a testament to his unwavering conviction. Suddenly, a young Lakota boy, no older than 8, ran out from behind the teepees. It was Redfeather's son. He had a small carved wooden horse in his hand, a gift from Jesse. He ran toward Jesse, a wide smile on his face, oblivious to the danger. He stood beside the rancher, his small hand reaching out and grasping Jesse's. Black Claw and his men froze. The sight of the child, a symbol of innocence and the future of their people, standing beside the white man, a symbol of their enemy, was a powerful, jarring image. The child was not afraid. He was not a hostage. He was a friend. Black Claw's eyes went from the child to Jesse's face, a face filled with a quiet dignity and a profound love for the people who had become his friends. He saw a man, not a symbol. He saw a man who had earned the trust of a child and the respect of a chief. He saw a man who had done what he, a warrior, could not do. He had brought peace. The anger and the fury that had consumed Black Claw for so long began to recede, replaced by a profound confusion. The narrative he had clung to, the world he had known, was unraveling before his very eyes. The man he had come to kill was not an enemy. He was a friend. The war he had come to fight was not a war of honor, but a war of his own making, a war against a man who had no desire to fight him. Black Claw slowly lowered his rifle. The other warriors, seeing their leader's change of heart, followed suit. The tension, which had been so palpable, now dissipated, replaced by a profound, almost uncomfortable silence. The confrontation was over. The battle had been won, not with violence, but with a simple act of trust, with the innocence of a child, and with the unwavering conviction of a man who had found a new purpose. The silence that followed Black Claw's surrender was a living, breathing thing. The air was no longer heavy with hostility, but with the weight of profound change. The two groups, once on the brink of war, now stood in a quiet, almost awkward truce. Black Claw, his face a mask of conflicting emotions, looked from Jesse to Wombly, his worldview shattered. The man he had come to kill was not a villain, but a man of honor. The man he respected, Wombly, was not a captive, but a friend. Grey Wolf, seeing the moment for what it was, stepped forward. He spoke to Black Claw in their native tongue, his voice low and gentle. He spoke of Wombly's rescue, of Jesse's courage, of the quiet strength of the white man. He spoke of the new path, a path of peace and understanding, a path that had been opened by a simple act of kindness. Black Claw listened, his eyes downcast. The fire in his eyes had been replaced by a profound sense of confusion and shame. He had come to fight a war, but he had found only peace. He had come to reclaim his honor, but he had found only a profound lesson in humility. Slowly, Black Claw turned to Jesse. He did not speak, but his gaze was a silent apology, a profound acknowledgement of his mistake. Jesse, for his part, simply nodded. He knew that Black Claw's pain was real, that his anger was born of a deep and righteous fury. He held no grudge. He just felt a profound sense of relief. Over the next few days, a new kind of rhythm settled over the ranch. Black Claw and his warriors did not leave. They set up their own camp, a respectful distance from the first, and watched. They watched Jesse and Wombly, two men from different worlds, share a meal, a conversation, a quiet moment of peace. They watched Jesse and the Lakota warriors, men who had been on the brink of battle, now share stories and laughter. They saw a world they had never imagined possible. Black Claw, the man who had been consumed by hatred, began to change. He would sit for hours watching Jesse work, his gaze no longer filled with suspicion, but with a quiet, almost reluctant curiosity. One afternoon he approached Jesse. He held a piece of carved wood in his hand, a small, intricate representation of a buffalo. "My people, we have lost much," Black Claw said, his voice low and hesitant. We have lost our land. We have lost our way of life. We have lost our trust. Jesse nodded. I know, he said, his voice soft. I have lost a lot too. But you have found a new path, Blackclaw said, his gaze fixed on the ground. You have shown us that it is possible, that not all white men are our enemies, that a man's heart can be as wide as the sky. He offered Jesse the carved buffalo. This is a gift, he said. It is a symbol of our trust. It is a symbol of our new path. Jesse took the gift, a profound sense of humility washing over him. The small piece of wood was more than just a carving. It was an apology. It was a promise. It was a bridge between two worlds, a bridge that he, a simple rancher, had helped build. The alliance between Jesse and the Lakota was now complete. The warriors, who had come with anger and suspicion, now saw him as a friend, a brother. He was no longer just a man living on the fringes of two worlds. He was a part of both. He was a symbol of hope in a land consumed by conflict. He had saved a life. He had faced down a threat, and in doing so he had become a part of something larger than himself, something ancient and profound. He was a rancher, a friend, and now a warrior of peace, and his quiet, solitary life had been transformed into a living, breathing testament to the power of human connection. The quiet peace that had settled over the ranch was a fragile thing. The Lakota encampment, now a unified community, had found a temporary home. The days were filled with a sense of purpose and camaraderie, but even as the community settled in, Jesse knew that their newfound peace was a defiant act, a direct challenge to the established order of the West. He knew that the news of the Lakota encampment and their alliance with a white rancher would not be received well in the nearby settler towns. His fears were soon realized. A week after Blackclaw's arrival, a lone rider appeared on the horizon. He was not a warrior or a friend. He was a lawman, a U.S. Marshal named Frank Dalton. Dalton was a man of the law, but his law was the white man's law, a law that had little respect for the Lakota or their ways. He was a stern, uncompromising man, and his presence brought with it a renewed sense of unease. Dalton rode into the ranch, his gaze taking in the Lakota encampment with a cold, disapproving eye. He saw the teepees, the horses, the children, and a look of contempt spread across his face. He dismounted, his hand resting on the hilt of his revolver, his posture rigid. "I've heard stories, Thorne," Dalton said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "Stories about you consorting with these hostiles. I've heard you're harboring them, giving them a place to make trouble." Jesse stepped forward, his own posture a mix of defiance and calm. "These are not hostiles, Marshal. They are my friends. They are here in peace." Dalton laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Peace? There is no peace with these people. They are a threat to our way of life. They have no right to be on this land. This land is as much theirs as it is ours," Wombly said, his voice a quiet but powerful force. "We have lived on this land for generations. We have respected this land. We have lived in harmony with it." "Your harmony is a threat to the law," Dalton countered, his eyes narrowing. "The law says this land is for settlers. The law says these people belong on a reservation." Jesse felt a surge of anger. "This man saved my life, Marshal. I owe him. And his people, they have come to me in peace. They have not harmed anyone." "The law doesn't care about your stories, Thorne," Dalton said, his voice hardening. "The law is the law. You have 2 days to get these people off your land. If they are not gone, I will return with a posse, and there will be bloodshed. The law will be enforced." Dalton's words were a cold blade, a stark reminder of the reality of their situation. The peace they had built so carefully and with so much effort was a fragile thing, easily shattered by the harsh hand of the law. Dalton mounted his horse and rode away, leaving a profound and unsettling silence in his wake. The Lakota warriors, who had watched the confrontation from a distance, now looked at Jesse with a new sense of fear. They had faced Miller, a man of simple greed and prejudice. But a man of the law, that was a different kind of enemy. Jesse stood in the middle of his ranch, the quiet, solitary place he had so carefully built, and felt a profound sense of helplessness. He had done the right thing. He had saved a life. But in doing so, he had invited a storm of biblical proportions to his doorstep. He looked at Wombly and Grey Wolf, their faces a mask of quiet resolve. They had trusted him. They had placed their faith in him. He knew he could not betray that trust. He had to find a way to save them, a way to defy the law without resorting to bloodshed. He had 2 days. The clock was ticking. The news of the marshal's ultimatum sent a ripple of fear through the Lakota encampment. The peaceful atmosphere that had settled over the ranch was shattered, replaced by a sense of impending doom. The warriors, who had stood tall against Miller, now looked at the ground, their faces grim. A lawman was a different kind of enemy. A lawman had the full weight of the government behind him. Jesse, however, was not one to be intimidated. The fear he had felt in the face of Miller and Black Claw was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. He had saved a life, and he would not stand by and watch that life, and the lives of the people who had become his family, be destroyed by a man of the law. He called for a meeting with Grey Wolf and Wombly. The 3 men sat in a circle, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of a lantern. Jesse, a man who had always valued his solitude, now felt a deep sense of shared purpose. "We cannot fight them," Jesse said, his voice low and firm. "A fight will only lead to bloodshed. We have to find another way." Grey Wolf and Wombly nodded in agreement. They were men of peace, but they were also men of action. They knew that a peaceful resolution was their only hope. "We have to show them," Grey Wolf said, his voice a low rumble. "We have to show the world that we are a people of peace. We have to show them that we are not a threat." "How?" Jesse asked. Wombly, who had been silent, spoke. "We will show them the truth," he said, his voice a quiet whisper. "We will show them the truth of who we are. We will not hide. We will show them our customs. We will show them our dances. We will show them our hearts." Jesse felt a flicker of hope. Wombly's words were a radical idea, a defiant act of peace. It was a plan that was both audacious and incredibly dangerous. The Lakota, who had been forced into hiding for generations, were being asked to step out into the light, to show their true colors to a world that had only ever seen them as a threat. Jesse knew that Wombly's plan was their only hope. He knew that Dalton would not be swayed by words. He would only be swayed by the undeniable truth of a people who were not what he expected them to be. The next 2 days were a blur of activity. The Lakota encampment, which had been so quiet, was now a flurry of motion. The warriors, their faces now filled with a new sense of purpose, put away their war paint and their weapons. They prepared for a show of peace, not of war. The women began to prepare food, the aroma of cooked meat and wild herbs filling the air. The children, their faces bright with a new kind of excitement, practiced their dances, their movements a graceful, fluid expression of their culture. Jesse, for his part, prepared his own part of the show. He made a large banner, a white flag, and placed it on a pole outside his cabin. It was a symbol of his own commitment to peace, a signal to the world that his ranch was a place of a new kind of alliance. As the sun began to set on the 2nd day, Jesse, Wombly, and Grey Wolf stood on a small hill overlooking the canyon. The air was cool and filled with the scent of the desert at night. Below them, the Lakota encampment was a living, breathing testament to a people's resilience and hope. The teepees, a stark contrast to the red earth, were a symbol of their defiance. The fire, which had been so small and quiet, now burned bright and warm, a beacon of light in the vast, silent night. Jesse looked at Wombly and Grey Wolf, their faces a mask of quiet resolve. They had a plan, they had a purpose, they had a hope, but they also knew that their plan was a gamble, a dangerous one. They were asking a man of the law, a man whose mind was set in stone, to open his heart to a people he had long considered his enemy. They knew that their peaceful defiance could be seen as an act of aggression, a reason for a fight, but they also knew that they had no other choice. They had to stand for peace even if it meant a war. They had to show the world that a new path was possible, a path of understanding, a path of hope, and they were ready. The morning dawned with a quiet anticipation that hung in the air. The Lakota encampment, which had spent the last 2 days preparing, was ready. The warriors, dressed in their finest ceremonial clothing, their faces painted with symbols of peace, not of war, stood in a silent, dignified line. The women, their dresses a colorful array of beadwork and artistry, stood beside them, their hands clasped in a gesture of unity. The children, their faces bright with curiosity, peered out from behind their parents, their laughter a sound of profound hope. Jesse stood on the porch of his cabin, a silent sentinel. He was dressed in his cleanest clothes, his boots polished, his face freshly shaven. He was a rancher, a simple man, but he was also a symbol, a living testament to a new kind of alliance. He looked at Wombly and Grey Wolf, two men who had become his friends, and felt a profound sense of camaraderie. The sound of horse hooves broke the silence. Marshal Dalton, his face a mask of cold resolve, rode into the ranch. He was not alone. Behind him, a posse of 20 armed men, their faces grim and determined, rode with a sense of purpose. They were here to enforce the law, to put an end to what they saw as a dangerous alliance. Dalton dismounted, his gaze taking in the scene with a mix of disbelief and contempt. He had expected to find a hidden encampment, a nest of hostiles, a scene of defiance. He had not expected to find a community dressed in ceremonial clothing, their hands empty, their faces filled with a quiet dignity. "Where are the weapons, Thorne?" Dalton demanded, his voice a low, threatening rumble. "Where are the guns? Where are the bows?" "There are no weapons, Marshal," Jesse said, his voice steady. "There is no fight here. We are a people of peace." "Do not lie to me," Dalton shouted, his voice rising in anger. "I know who these people are. They are a threat to our way of life. They are hostiles. The law says they are to be on a reservation." Grey Wolf stepped forward, his posture proud and defiant. He spoke to Dalton, his voice a quiet but powerful force. "We are not hostiles," he said. "We are the people of this land. We have come in peace. We have come to show you our hearts." Dalton's face was a mask of confusion and frustration. He had a job to do. He had a law to enforce. But the sight before him defied all logic. He looked at the Lakota, their faces filled with a quiet strength, their hands empty. He looked at Jesse, the rancher who had sided with them, his face filled with a quiet resolve. He looked at Wombly, the elder, a man who had defied all expectations, a man who had found a friend in a world of enemies. He had expected a fight, a clear-cut battle of good versus evil. He had not expected to find a powerful, unified community, a people who were not what he had been told they were. He had not expected to find a new kind of defiance, a defiance born of peace, not of war. "I don't believe you," Dalton said, his voice a low, hesitant whisper. "This is a trick. This is a trap." "There is no trick here, Marshal," Jesse said. "There is only truth. We have come to show you that a new path is possible, a path of peace, a path of understanding, a path of hope." Dalton stood in the middle of the ranch, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. He was a man of the law, a man of black and white, of right and wrong. But the sight before him was a world of grey, a world of possibility. He looked at his posse, their faces a mix of confusion and frustration. They had come for a fight, and they had found only a profound, almost uncomfortable peace. The standoff continued, a silent battle of wills, a quiet confrontation between two opposing ideologies. One, a world of law and order, of black and white. The other, a world of peace and understanding, of a new kind of alliance. The fate of the Lakota people and the future of the West hung in the balance, a quiet drama unfolding in the heart of a sun-drenched canyon. And for the first time in his life, Dalton, a man of the law, had to make a choice that was not in his book of rules. He had to choose between the law and his heart. He had to choose between the path of conflict and the path of peace. The silence was a palpable force, stretching and holding its breath. Marshal Dalton, his face a mask of conflict, stood motionless, his mind a battlefield. He had come to the ranch to enforce a law he believed in, a law that painted the Lakota as a threat. But the scene before him, the peaceful, dignified community, shattered his preconceived notions. Jesse, seeing the marshal's internal struggle, knew he had to act. He had to show Dalton something that was beyond the law, something that was beyond words. He looked at Wombly, who gave him a small, knowing nod. The elder had planned for this moment, a final act of peace that would either win over the marshal or seal their fate. Wombly raised his hands, a signal to his people. A young Lakota boy, no older than 10, stepped forward. He held a drum in his hands. He began to beat it, a slow, rhythmic beat that resonated in the quiet air. Other warriors joined in, their drums a powerful, unified chorus. Then the young children, their faces bright with a profound hope, began to dance. They were not dancing a war dance. They were dancing a dance of peace, a graceful, fluid expression of their culture, their history, their spirit. The dance was a story, a testament to their deep connection to the land, their respect for nature, their profound spiritual beliefs. The sight was breathtaking. The children, their movements a living, breathing testament to their culture, were a beautiful, powerful contradiction to everything Dalton had been told. He saw not a group of savages, but a people of incredible grace and profound dignity. As the children danced, the women began to sing, their voices a soft melodic harmony that carried on the wind. It was a song of their ancestors, a song of the land, a song of peace. The music was a living, breathing thing, a testament to a culture that refused to die, a culture that had found a new kind of strength in the face of a new kind of enemy. Dalton stood in the middle of the ranch, his posse a silent, watchful presence behind him, and watched the dance of peace. He saw the passion in the dancers' eyes, the love in the women's voices, the unwavering resolve in the warriors' faces. He saw a people who were not a threat, but a people who simply wanted to live, to exist, to be. He looked at Jesse, the simple rancher who had risked everything to stand with them. He saw in Jesse's face a profound sense of purpose, a man who had found a new kind of family, a new kind of meaning. He saw in Jesse's quiet resolve a reflection of the same strength he saw in the faces of the Lakota. The dance came to an end. The music faded, leaving a profound and powerful silence in its wake. The children, their faces flushed with exertion, stood still, their gazes fixed on the marshal. Dalton, a man of the law, a man of black and white, felt a profound change in his heart. The law said one thing, but his eyes, his ears, his very soul told him something else. He saw the truth. He saw a people of peace. He saw a man of honor. He saw a new kind of world, a world where enemies could become friends, a world where peace was not just a word, but a living, breathing reality. Slowly, deliberately, Dalton unbuckled his gun belt and dropped it to the ground. The sound of the metal hitting the dirt was a loud, powerful sound, a signal to his men, a signal to the Lakota, a signal to the world. It was a surrender to a new kind of law, a law of the heart, a law of peace. The law is a strange thing, Thorne, Dalton said, his voice a low, rough whisper. Sometimes it's not what's in the book. Sometimes it's what's in the heart. I came here to enforce the law. I'm leaving here with a new kind of truth. You and your friends, you are not a threat. You are a lesson, to me and to the world. Dalton mounted his horse, a profound sense of humility in his posture. He and his posse rode away, leaving a trail of dust and a sense of profound relief. The standoff was over. The battle had been won, not with violence, but with a simple act of peace, with the power of a people's culture, and with the unwavering conviction of a man who had found his purpose in a place he had never expected to find it. The ranch, once a place of solitude, was now a beacon of hope. And Jesse, the quiet rancher, was now for the first time in his life a part of a community, a part of a family, a part of something that was both ancient and new. Marshal Dalton's retreat sent a wave of relief and cautious celebration through the ranch. The Lakota, who had faced a potential massacre with unwavering dignity, now allowed themselves a moment of joy. The children, whose dance had changed the course of a day, were embraced by their parents. The warriors, their faces now filled with smiles, shared a silent moment of respect with Jesse, a man who had become a brother. The peace that had been won was a profound and powerful thing, but Jesse knew it was also a fragile one. The ranch was now a symbol, a testament to the idea that peace between the two worlds was possible, but it was also a target. He knew that Miller, the land speculator, would not take Dalton's decision lightly. He knew that the news of the marshal's surrender would infuriate him, and that he would seek revenge. Jesse, Wombly, and Grey Wolf sat by the fire that night, their conversation a mix of cautious hope and profound realism. "We have won a battle," Grey Wolf said, his voice a low rumble. "But the war is not over. The white man's world, it is a hungry world. It wants our land. It will not stop. Then we have to show them that our land is not for sale," Jesse said, his voice firm. "We have to show them that our alliance is not a temporary thing. We have to show them that we are a people of peace, but we will not be pushed around." Wombly, his face illuminated by the firelight, looked at Jesse with a profound sense of wisdom. "You have become a leader, Jesse Thorne," he said. "You have not just saved me. You have saved my people. You have given them hope. You have given them a new path." Jesse felt a profound sense of humility. He was not a leader. He was just a man. He had acted on instinct, on a moral compass that had always guided him. But in Wombly's words, he saw a truth he could not deny. He was a part of something larger than himself. He had a responsibility, a purpose, a new life. The next few days were a period of profound transition. The Lakota encampment, which had been a temporary home, now became a permanent one. The warriors, who had been in a constant state of readiness, now began to build. They built more permanent structures. They began to till the soil. They began to prepare for a life of peace. They were a people who had long been nomadic, and now they were a people who were putting down roots. Jesse, for his part, worked alongside them. He taught them how to build fences that would last, how to dig a well that would not run dry, how to plant crops that would grow in the arid soil. He was not just a rancher anymore. He was a teacher, a builder, a part of a community. But even as the community grew, Jesse knew that their peace was a fragile one. He knew that the outside world was watching. He knew that the story of the white rancher and the Lakota people would not be contained. He knew that it would spread, and that it would attract not just hope but also a profound and dangerous kind of hatred. One evening, as he sat by the fire, a young Lakota boy approached him. It was Red Feather's son, the boy whose innocent courage had helped to end the standoff. He held a small carved wooden horse in his hand, a gift from Jesse. He sat beside Jesse, his small hand reaching out and grasping Jesse's. "You are a good man, Jesse," the boy said, his voice a quiet whisper. "You have given us hope. You have given us a new home." Jesse looked at the boy, his heart filled with a profound sense of purpose. He was no longer a man running from his past. He was a man building a future. He was a man who had found his place in the world. He was a man who had saved a life, and in doing so he had found his own. The road ahead was long and filled with danger, but he was no longer alone. He had a family. He had a home. He had a purpose. And that, he knew, was worth fighting for. News of the Marshals' retreat from Jesse Thorne's ranch spread through the surrounding towns like a prairie fire. For some, it was a story of hope, a testament to the possibility of peace. For others, it was a story of betrayal, a sign of the law's weakness and the Lakota's treachery. The latter was the view held by Gideon Miller, the ruthless land speculator, and his hired men. Miller had been humiliated. He had been outmaneuvered by a simple rancher and a group of what he considered to be savages. His pride and his business had taken a heavy blow. He knew he could not confront the Lakota and Thorne in an open fight. Dalton's retreat had made that clear. So he chose a new, more insidious path. He chose revenge, and he chose to do it from the shadows. He began to spread lies, insidious rumors that painted Jesse and the Lakota as a dangerous, rebellious force. He told the settlers that Jesse was a traitor, that he was stockpiling weapons and preparing to lead the Lakota in a war against the white man. He exploited their fears, their prejudices, their insecurities. He painted a picture of a peaceful community as a wolf in sheep's clothing, a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. Back at the ranch, life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. The Lakota and Jesse worked side by side, their days a mix of hard labor and quiet conversations. They were building a community, a new kind of home. They were a living, breathing testament to the idea that a different world was possible. But Jesse, a man of instinct, felt a change in the air. The quiet calm felt too still, too perfect. He had a feeling, a cold knot in his stomach, that a storm was brewing. He saw it in the way the local traders, who had once been friendly, now looked at him with a mix of fear and suspicion. He heard it in the hushed whispers that followed him when he rode into town. He felt the weight of the rumors, a dark, heavy force that was slowly but surely poisoning the well of hope he had so carefully built. One day, while Jesse was in town, a young man, a store owner he had known for years, pulled him aside. "Jesse," the man said, his voice a low, hesitant whisper, "I've been hearing things. People are saying you're a traitor. They're saying you're working with the hostiles. They're saying you're going to lead them in a war." Jesse's heart sank. The rumors were worse than he thought. He felt a profound sense of helplessness. He could not fight a whisper. He could not fight a lie. A whisper travels faster than a bullet, and it leaves a deeper wound. He rode back to the ranch, his mind a whirlwind of worry. He told Grey Wolf and Wombly about the rumors. Grey Wolf's face hardened, a grim resolve in his eyes. He knew this kind of enemy. This was a war of hearts and minds, a war that was more dangerous than any a rifle could win. "We have to show them the truth," Grey Wolf said, his voice a low rumble. "We have to show them that we are not what they say we are." "How?" Jesse asked, his voice filled with frustration. "You can't fight a lie with the truth. A lie is louder." Wombly, who had been silent, spoke. "We must not fight with anger, Jesse," he said, his voice a gentle, wise whisper. "We must fight with our actions. We must show them with our hearts that their words are poison. We must live our truth. We must show them that we are a people of peace and that we will not be moved." Jesse felt a flicker of hope. He knew Wombly was right. They could not win a war of words. They could only win a war of actions. They had to continue to live their lives, to build their community, to be a living, breathing testament to the idea that a new world was possible. They had to show them that a whisper could not win against a profound, unshakable truth. The war had begun not with a bang, but with a whisper, and Jesse knew that the greatest test of all was just beginning. They were no longer just building a home. They were building a monument to peace, and a monument he knew would always be a target. The poison of Miller's lies began to spread its toxic influence with frightening speed. The whispers in town became open accusations. Jesse, once a respected if solitary member of the community, was now viewed with profound suspicion. Farmers he had known for years now turned their backs when he rode by. The blacksmith, who had been his friend, now refused to shoe his horses. The general store owner, a kind old man who had always shared a friendly word, now looked at him with fear in his eyes. The isolation Jesse had once sought, he now had in abundance, but it was a different, more painful kind of isolation. It was the isolation of a man who was no longer just alone, but who was also an outcast. He was a man who had chosen to do the right thing, and he was being punished for it. The Lakota at the ranch felt the change as well. When the occasional rider would pass by, they would see them stop and stare, their gazes filled with a mix of curiosity and fear. The children, who had once played so freely, now played closer to their parents, a sense of unease in their small bodies. The community, which had been so vibrant, now had a new, quiet solemnity, a profound sense of being watched, of being judged. Jesse knew that the rumors were just the beginning. Miller was not a man of half measures. He was a man who would see his plan through to its bitter end. He had a feeling that Miller's next move would be a more direct one, a more violent one. One afternoon, Jesse was mending a fence near the outer boundary of his land. He had his rifle slung over his shoulder, a constant reminder of the danger they were in. Suddenly, a bullet whizzed past his head, embedding itself in the wooden fence post behind him with a sharp thud. Jesse hit the dirt, his heart hammering against his ribs. He looked up, his eyes scanning the horizon. He saw no one. The shot had come from a distant hill, a cowardly act of a man who was afraid to show his face. It was a warning, a message. Miller was not just spreading rumors. He was a man who was willing to act on them. Jesse raced back to the ranch, his mind a whirlwind of rage and fear. He told Grey Wolf and Wombly what had happened. Grey Wolf's face hardened, his eyes filled with a grim resolve. "They have started the fight," he said, his voice a low rumble. "They have thrown the first stone. We must be ready." The community went on high alert. The warriors, who had put away their weapons, now took them out again. They posted guards on the perimeter of the ranch, their eyes fixed on the distant hills. The women and children, their faces filled with a quiet dread, stayed closer to the encampment. The ranch, which had been a haven of peace, was now a fortress, a bastion of hope in a world that was consumed by fear and hatred. Jesse sat with Wombly and Grey Wolf by the fire that night. The flames, which had been a symbol of warmth and community, now felt like a symbol of defiance. They were surrounded not by a physical army but by a psychological one. They were fighting a war against fear, against prejudice, against a man who was willing to use any means to get what he wanted. "We cannot win this with violence," Wombly said, his voice a quiet whisper. "If we fight them with guns, we will become what they say we are. We will become a symbol of what they fear." "Then what do we do?" Jesse asked, his voice filled with a profound sense of helplessness. "We can't just stand here and wait for them to come. We have to do something." Wombly looked at Jesse, his eyes filled with a profound sense of wisdom. "We have to show them that our love is stronger than their hatred," he said. "We have to show them that our peace is more powerful than their war. We have to stand our ground. We have to live our truth. And we have to show the world that a whisper cannot win against a profound, unshakable truth." Jesse felt a flicker of hope. He knew Wombly was right. They had to fight. But they had to fight in a new way, with a new kind of weapon. They had to fight with their hearts, with their actions, with their unwavering resolve. The war was no longer just about land. It was about something much larger. It was about the soul of a people. It was about the future of the West. It was about the profound, unshakable power of peace. And Jesse, the quiet rancher, was ready to lead the fight. The poisoned air of rumor and suspicion had finally settled into a tense, suffocating silence. It was the kind of quiet that felt louder than a shout, a stillness that held the weight of 1,000 unspoken threats. The occasional, distant gunshot from the surrounding hills served as a stark and brutal reminder of the looming threat, a cold bullet message from an enemy who refused to show his face. Jesse and the Lakota community, a beacon of hope forged in the fires of shared kindness, were now a fortress under siege, not just by physical men, but by a consuming psychological dread. The days were a blur of vigilance and preparation, a constant state of readiness that etched lines of exhaustion onto every face. The warriors, their faces grim and their bodies honed by generations of discipline, maintained a constant watch. They moved with a quiet, practiced grace, their senses on high alert, their eyes scanning the horizon for the slightest hint of movement. They were no longer hunters. They were sentinels. Their quiet movements were a testament to their unwavering commitment, a silent, powerful dance of protection. The women and children, their faces filled with a mix of fear and a defiant resolve, went about their daily lives with a new, sober purpose. The act of fetching water, of mending a blanket, of tending to a fire, was now a small, defiant act of peace in a world that was screaming for war. Jesse, a man who had always valued his solitude, found himself transformed. He was no longer just a rancher. He was a leader, a protector, a part of a community that was fighting for its very survival. The weight of that responsibility was heavy, a constant pressure that settled in his bones and made every breath feel like a deliberate effort. He spent his days and nights in a whirlwind of strategies and plans with Grey Wolf and Wombly. They knew, with a chilling certainty, that they could not fight a full-scale war. They were outnumbered and outgunned, and a direct conflict would mean their annihilation. They had to find a different way, a path that would honor their commitment to peace while also protecting their home. It was a moral paradox, a challenge that went against every instinct. "They will not stop," Grey Wolf said one night, his voice a low rumble that seemed to come from the very earth itself. He held a piece of carved wood in his hand, a small, intricate representation of a buffalo, his fingers tracing its contours with a quiet, practiced ease. "Miller and his men, they are like a hungry animal. They are not satisfied with what they have. They will not rest until they have what they want. They will take everything, even the very air we breathe. Then we will show them that we are not afraid," Jesse said, his voice firm, a quiet, unshakable force in the face of Grey Wolf's grim prophecy. "We will show them that our peace is our strength. We will not be moved. We will not be broken." Wombly, his face illuminated by the firelight, looked at Jesse with a profound sense of wisdom. "The white man's law," he said, his voice a quiet whisper that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 generations. "It is a strong law. It is a law of paper and ink, of guns and power. But it is not the only law. There is a higher law, a law of the heart, a law of the Great Spirit. We must show them that our law is stronger. We must show them that a truth spoken from the heart is more powerful than any lie shouted with a gun." Jesse felt a flicker of hope. He knew Wombly was right. They had to fight. But they had to fight in a new way. They had to fight with their hearts, with their actions, with their unwavering resolve. They had to show the world that a profound, unshakable truth was more powerful than any lie. As the days turned into nights, the tension at the ranch grew to a fever pitch. The occasional bullet, a silent, menacing threat, was a constant reminder of the danger. The community, which had been so vibrant, was now a quiet, solemn place. The laughter of the children had been replaced by a quiet, watchful silence. The air, which had been filled with a sense of hope, was now thick with a sense of dread. One evening, as Jesse stood on the porch, a sudden, powerful thought hit him. He had been so focused on protecting the ranch, on fighting the external enemy, that he had forgotten about the internal one. He had forgotten about the anger, the frustration, the fear that was brewing within his own community. He had to remind them of their purpose, of their strength, of their unwavering commitment to peace. He had to remind them that they were not just a community under siege, but a symbol of a profound and powerful truth. He called for a meeting. The entire community, a sea of grim faces, gathered around him. He looked at them, a profound sense of love and purpose in his eyes. He saw their fear, their exhaustion, their frustration, and he saw their unwavering strength, a strength that was born of a profound love for their home and their family. "I know you are afraid," Jesse said, his voice a low, steady rumble that seemed to carry the weight of the moment. "I know you are tired. I know you are frustrated. But I want you to remember why we are here. We are not just a community. We are a symbol. We are a testament to the idea that a new world is possible. We have to show them that our peace is our strength. We have to show them that our hearts are our greatest weapon. We have to show them that a profound, unshakable truth is more powerful than any lie." The Lakota, their faces filled with a profound sense of pride, looked at Jesse with a new sense of purpose. They had been reminded of their mission. They had been reminded of their strength. They had been reminded that they were not just a community under siege, but a symbol of a profound and powerful truth. The night was quiet, a calm before the storm. The occasional gunshot, a distant, menacing sound, was a stark reminder of what was to come. Jesse, a man who had always been alone, was now a part of something larger than himself, something ancient and profound. He was a leader, a protector, a symbol of hope. He had a feeling that the final confrontation was close, a clash of two opposing worlds, a battle for the soul of a people. And he was ready. He had to be. The night was a canvas of inky blackness, broken only by the distant pinprick stars that seemed to mock the mortal struggle below. A chilling wind, a harbinger of things to come, whispered through the canyons, carrying the scent of dust and fear. The ranch, a beacon of hope in the vast, silent desert, was shrouded in a profound, almost eerie quiet. It was the quiet of a coiled serpent, a stillness that preceded a strike. Jesse, Grey Wolf, and the Lakota warriors were on high alert. They had been expecting an attack, but they had not expected it to come at night. Miller, a coward by nature, knew that a night attack would give his men a profound advantage. He knew that the darkness, a tool of fear and confusion, would be their greatest weapon. It would turn a battle into a slaughter, a fight into a panicked retreat. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by a cacophony of sound. Gunshots rang out, their thunderous crack echoing off the canyon walls like 1,000 angry gods. The air was filled with the sound of whizzing bullets, of men shouting, of the terrified whinny of horses. The attack had begun. Jesse, his rifle in hand, moved with a practiced ease, his senses on high alert. He was not a man of violence, but he was a man who knew how to defend himself. He and the Lakota warriors, a unified force, returned fire, their shots a testament to their unwavering resolve. The battle was a blur of sound and fury, a chaotic symphony of violence. Jesse, a man who had always avoided conflict, was now a soldier, a warrior, a protector. He moved with a quiet, deadly grace, his movements a testament to his newfound purpose. He was no longer just a man fighting for his home. He was a man fighting for a new world, a world where peace was not just a word, but a living, breathing reality. The Lakota warriors, their faces grim, fought with a fierce, unwavering resolve. They were not just fighting for their lives. They were fighting for their traditions, for their history, for their very souls. They were a people who had been pushed to their breaking point, and they were fighting back with a courage that was born of a profound, unshakable love for their home. The battle raged on, a fiery ballet of violence. The darkness was illuminated by the muzzle flashes of the rifles. The sky was a canvas of orange and red. The ranch, a symbol of hope, was now a battlefield, a testament to the profound and dangerous reality of their situation. Suddenly, a powerful explosion rocked the ground. Miller's men had planted dynamite, a final, desperate act of violence. The ground shook. The air was filled with the sound of debris and the smell of gunpowder. The ranch house, a symbol of Jesse's quiet life, was engulfed in flames, a fiery testament to the profound hatred that had been unleashed. The fire, a living, breathing thing, consumed the wood, the memories, the life that had been so carefully built. Jesse, a man who had lost everything before, felt a profound sense of loss. His home, a place of solitude and peace, was gone. But he also felt a profound sense of purpose. He was no longer just a man fighting for his home. He was a man fighting for a new world, a world that was worth fighting for, a world that was worth dying for. The Lakota, their faces grim, continued to fight. The loss of the house was a profound one, but it was also a rallying cry. It was a stark reminder of what they were fighting for. They were fighting for their lives, for their traditions, for their very souls. The battle raged on, a fiery symphony of violence. The night was a canvas of smoke and fire, a testament to the profound and dangerous reality of their situation. Jesse, a man who had always been alone, was now a part of something larger than himself, something ancient and profound. He was a leader, a protector, a symbol of hope. He had a feeling that the final confrontation was close, a clash of two opposing worlds, a battle for the soul of a people, and he was ready. He had to be. The night attack, a brutal symphony of fire and fury, had taken its toll. The early morning sun, a pale, watery eye, rose on a scene of devastation. The ground was littered with spent bullet casings, with splintered wood, with the remnants of a battle that had almost cost them everything. The ranch house, a testament to Jesse's quiet life, was a pile of smoldering ash, a black wound on the landscape. The Lakota encampment, a symbol of their resilience, was scarred by the battle, the teepees torn, and the ground churned by the horses' hooves. But the community, a living, breathing testament to their unwavering spirit, was alive. Jesse, his face a mask of exhaustion, stood in the middle of the devastation, his heart a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. He had lost his home, but he had not lost his purpose. He had lost his past, but he had not lost his future. He had lost so much, but he had also found so much more. Grey Wolf and Wombly, their faces grim, approached him. They had lost some of their men, brave warriors who had died defending their home. The loss was a profound one, a stark reminder of the cost of their peace. "They will be back," Grey Wolf said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "They will not rest until they have what they want. Then we will be ready for them," Jesse said, his voice firm, a quiet, unshakable force in the face of Grey Wolf's grim prophecy. "We will show them that we are not afraid. We will show them that our peace is our strength. We will not be moved." He looked at Wombly, a man who had become his friend, his guide, his family. Wombly, his face filled with a profound sense of wisdom, simply nodded. He knew that the final confrontation was close. He knew that this was it, the battle for the soul of a people. The day was a long one, filled with a grim, determined purpose. The Lakota, their faces grim, tended to their wounded, their movements a testament to their unwavering resolve. They were a people who had faced down death before, and they were not afraid to do it again. Jesse, a man who had always been alone, was now a part of a community. He worked alongside them, his movements a testament to his newfound purpose. He was not just a man fighting for his home. He was a man fighting for a new world, a world where peace was not just a word, but a living, breathing reality. As the sun began its slow descent, a new threat appeared on the horizon. It was Miller and his men, a group of 20, riding with a grim, determined purpose. They were not here to talk. They were here to finish the job. Jesse, Grey Wolf, and the Lakota warriors stood side by side, their weapons at the ready. This was it, the final stand, the clash of two opposing worlds. Miller, his face a mask of hatred, dismounted. "You should have surrendered, Thorne," he said, his voice a low, menacing growl. "You should have listened to the law. Now, you will pay the price." "There is a higher law, Miller," Jesse said, his voice a quiet but powerful force. "A law of the heart, a law of the Great Spirit. We have chosen to follow that law, and we will not be moved." Miller laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Your law will not save you," he sneered. "My law will. The law of the white man, the law of the gun, the law of greed, the law of hate, the law of the strong. My law is the only law that matters out here." The confrontation was a silent, tense thing, a battle of wills. Jesse, a man who had always been alone, was now a part of a community. He looked at Wombly and Grey Wolf, his friends, his family, and felt a profound sense of love and purpose. He was not just a man fighting for his home. He was a man fighting for a new world, a world where peace was not just a word but a living, breathing reality. He was a man who had found his purpose in a place he had never expected to find it, and he was ready. The air, thick with the weight of impending violence, hummed with a primal energy. It was a soundless scream, a collective breath held in the face of annihilation. Gideon Miller, his face a grim mask of a righteous fury, stood poised for battle, his rifle raised. Beside him, His posse of 20 men, hardened by a life of brutality and greed, mirrored his stance. Their faces were a testament to their loyalty, their prejudice, and the simple, brutal arithmetic of their world: power taken, land seized, profits made. They saw a quiet, defiant rancher and a community of what they considered savages, and they saw an easy, final victory. Across the scorched earth, amidst the smouldering ruin of his home, Jesse Thorne stood his ground. He was flanked by the Lakota warriors, their faces a mask of quiet resolve. They had endured the night of fire and fury, the loss of their sanctuary, and the brutal reality of their enemies' hatred. Yet, there was no fear in their eyes. There was only an unwavering dignity, a profound and ancient strength. The final confrontation had arrived, not in a blaze of glory, but in the desolate, silent morning light, a last desperate act in a war that had been fought in whispers and lies. Just as Miller's finger tensed on the trigger, a lone rider appeared on the horizon, a figure silhouetted against the rising sun. The rider was a familiar one, a figure of authority in the lawless landscape of the West. It was Marshal Frank Dalton, his face a grim mask of determination that was more chilling than any rage. He rode with a sense of purpose so absolute, it was like an extension of the earth itself, his hand resting on his revolver, a silent promise of a final, unyielding judgment. He had heard the distant echoes of the night attack, a sound that had been carried on the wind like a scream of a dying world. He had seen the smoke from the canyon, a black plume rising to the heavens like a testament to human cruelty. And he knew, with a certainty that was as cold and hard as the steel in his hand, that he had to act. He had to return and make a stand. Dalton rode with a controlled fury, a man on a mission that transcended the law he was sworn to uphold. He passed Miller's line of men, his gaze a silent condemnation, and rode straight between the two groups. He was a silent sentinel, his presence a powerful, unexpected force that brought both sides to a stunned halt. He had come to a battlefield expecting a war, and had found himself in the middle of a profound and powerful truth. He looked at Miller, his eyes filled with a cold, hard resolve, a reflection of the same courage he had seen in the eyes of the Lakota children. "Stand down, Miller," Dalton commanded, his voice a low, authoritative rumble that seemed to carry the weight of the very land they stood on. "This is not what the law is about. This is not justice. It is not even war. This is about hatred. This is about greed. This is about a man who wants to take what is not his, and who is willing to destroy everything in his path to get it." Miller's face, a mask of unyielding rage, contorted with a profound confusion. He had expected a confrontation, a challenge, a fight, but he had not expected this. "You are a traitor, Dalton," he spat, the words a venomous spray of disbelief and fury. "You are a man of the law. You should be on my side. You should be with us, enforcing the laws of this land, taking back what is ours." "The law is not about taking lives," Dalton countered, his voice steady and unwavering. "The law is about saving them. The law is about justice, not just for a few, but for all. And what you are doing here is a perversion of it. You use the law as a shield for your greed and a weapon for your hate. But I have seen a new kind of truth. I have seen a truth that is stronger than any law in any book." Miller's face, once a mask of arrogance, was now a portrait of a profound, soul-shattering defeat. He was a man who had always believed he was on the right side of the law, a man who had justified his cruelty with a simple, brutal logic. To hear a man of the law, a man he respected, tell him that he was wrong, that he was a perversion of the very principles he claimed to uphold, was a blow that shattered his reality. He looked at Dalton, at Jesse, at the Lakota, and for the first time in his life, he felt a profound and terrifying sense of being on the wrong side of history. Dalton, his gaze unwavering, looked at Jesse, his eyes filled with a profound sense of respect. He saw a man who had lost his home, but had not lost his humanity. He saw a man who had chosen a path of peace in a world of violence and had found a profound, unshakable strength in it. "I came here to enforce the law," Dalton said, his voice a quiet whisper that was more powerful than any shout. "I'm leaving here with a new kind of truth, a truth that you and your people have taught me, a truth that is more powerful than any law in any book." He turned to his posse, their faces a mix of confusion and frustration, and issued a final command. "You will leave this place," he commanded, his voice a low, authoritative rumble. "You will leave these people alone. you will leave them in peace. This is not what the law is about. This is about a man who wants to take what is not his, and I will not stand for it." Miller's men, their faces a mask of confusion, slowly lowered their rifles. The weight of their leader's hatred, their own prejudice, was a heavy burden, but the law, in the form of a man who had found his purpose, was a more powerful force. They had been taught to fight for their land, but they had not been taught to fight for peace. They had been taught to hate, but they had not been taught to love. They had been taught to follow, but they had not been taught to question. And now they were being forced to do both. Miller, his face a mask of furious, impotent rage, looked at Dalton, at Jesse, at the Lakota, and felt a profound and permanent sense of defeat. He had lost, not to a group of warriors, not to a man of the law. He had lost to a new kind of truth, a truth that was more powerful than any lie, a truth that was more powerful than any hatred. He turned and mounted his horse, a promise of revenge in his eyes, but his defeat was a profound and permanent one. He and his men rode away, leaving a trail of dust and a sense of profound relief. The standoff was over. The battle had been won, not with violence, but with a profound, unshakable truth, a truth that had been forged in the heart of a canyon, and a truth that would change the course of history. The aftermath of the standoff was not a moment of celebration, but a time of quiet, profound reflection. The air, which had been thick with tension, was now filled with the profound sense of a shared journey's end. The Lakota, their faces still grim from the night's battle, lowered their weapons and embraced their friends, their family, their new life. Jesse, a man who had always been alone, was now a part of something larger than himself, something ancient and profound. He looked at the smoldering remains of his home, a silent testament to a life that was gone, and felt a wave of grief. But he also felt a profound sense of gratitude. He had lost his house, but he had found a family. The days that followed were a blur of shared grief and shared purpose. The community, which had been so close to destruction, now came together with a fierce, unwavering resolve. They began to tend to their wounded, their movements a testament to their unwavering spirit. They began to clear the rubble of Jesse's house, their hands working in a silent, coordinated dance of shared labor. They were not just rebuilding a home, they were rebuilding their future, a future that was born of a profound and unshakable truth. Jesse, for his part, worked alongside them. He was not just a rancher anymore, he was a teacher, a builder, a part of a community. He was a man who had found his purpose in a place he had never expected to find it. He was a man who had saved a life, and in doing so, he had found his own. He taught them how to build fences that would last, how to dig a well that would not run dry, how to plant crops that would grow in the arid soil. In return, they taught him their ways, their traditions, their profound connection to the land. They were not just a community. They were a living, breathing testament to the idea that a new world was possible. Marshal Dalton, a man who had chosen a new path, returned to the town of Blackwood. He was not the same man. He was a man who had seen a new kind of truth, a man who had found his purpose in a place he had never expected to find it. The town, which had been filled with Miller's venomous whispers, was now a cauldron of conflicting emotions. Some, the ones who had profited from Miller's ruthless ambition, were furious. They saw Dalton as a traitor, a man who had betrayed his own kind. But others, the ones who had been silently horrified by the hatred, saw him as a hero. They saw a man who had chosen a higher law, a law of the heart, a law of justice. Dalton, a man of profound and quiet dignity, spoke of Jesse and the Lakota, not as a threat, but as a lesson. He spoke of the power of peace, of the power of a people who had chosen to live their truth in a world consumed by lies. The news of the standoff spread through the West, a story of hope in a world consumed by conflict. The story of the white rancher who had sided with the Lakota, a story of a community that had chosen peace in a world that was consumed by hatred, was a story that resonated with people. It was a story of a new kind of hero, a new kind of law, a new kind of world. The ranch, which had been a fortress, was now a beacon. It was a symbol of a new kind of alliance, a new kind of world. A world where enemies could become friends, a world where peace was not just a word, but a living, breathing reality. The community, a mix of two cultures, two histories, two worlds, was a profound and beautiful testament to the idea that a new beginning is always possible, even in a world that is consumed by lies. The final chapter of the story was not about a fight, but but about a profound and beautiful truth. It was a story of a man who had found his purpose, a community that had found its home, and a world that had found a new kind of hope. It was a story that reminded people that a single act of kindness can change the course of history, that a single man can change the world, that a profound, unshakable truth is more powerful than any lie. Years passed. The dust of the Old West settled, but the legacy of the cowboy who had saved a native elder remained a vibrant, living thing. The ranch, once a lonely outpost, had blossomed into a thriving community. It was a place where two worlds, once separated by a chasm of prejudice and hatred, had found a common ground. The land, once parched and unforgiving, was now a tapestry of green fields and lush gardens, a testament to the shared labor and shared purpose of the community. The ranch was no longer just a ranch. It was a place of learning, a place of healing, a place of profound and beautiful harmony. Children, both Lakota and white, played together, their laughter a testament to a new kind of world. They learned about their shared history, their shared traditions, their shared humanity. They learned the Lakota language, the stories of their ancestors, and the profound respect for nature that was at the core of their culture. They learned about the white man's world, the tools, the technology, the quiet determination that had built a new life in the desert. They were not just a new generation, they were a new kind of people, a people who were a living, breathing testament to the idea that a new world is always possible. Jesse Thorne, the quiet rancher who had risked everything, was a man of profound and quiet dignity. He was no longer the solitary man who had sought to escape his past. He was a man who had embraced his future, a future that was built on a foundation of love and peace. He was a man who had not just saved a life, but had also saved a people. He was a man who had not just found a new home, but a new family. He was a man who had not just built a ranch, but a community. He was a man who had found his purpose, a man who had found his peace. He would often sit on the porch of the new ranch house, a house that was a blend of two cultures, and watch the children play. He would think of his past, of the woman he had lost, of the life he had run from, and he would feel a profound sense of gratitude. He had lost so much, but he had gained so much more. He had found a family, a home, a purpose. Wambly, the elder who had been saved, was a man of profound wisdom and quiet dignity. He was a man who had not just found a new home, but a new kind of family. He was a man who had not just found a new path, but a new kind of peace. He was a living, breathing testament to the idea that a man's heart can be as wide as the plains. He was the spiritual leader of the community, a man who would tell the stories of his ancestors, a man who would teach the children about the profound and beautiful harmony of the Great Spirit. He was a man who had seen the world in black and white and had been shown a world of profound and beautiful color. The story of the cowboy who saved a native elder and the community that was born from that act of kindness was passed down from generation to generation. It was a story that was told around the fire at night, a story that was told to the children, a story that was told to the world. It was a story of hope, a story of peace, a story of a new kind of world. It was a story that reminded people that a single act of kindness can change the course of history, that a single man can change the world. It was a story that reminded people that a new path is always possible, even in a world consumed by hatred. It was a story that reminded people that a profound, unshakable truth is more powerful than any lie, and that, in the end, is what the legacy of the cowboy who saved a native elder was all about. The legacy of a man, a community, and a world that had chosen to live their truth in a world that was consumed by lies. The legacy of a profound and beautiful truth. And it was a legacy that was built, not with guns, but with love.